We are here in AIM Congress. This is the third day and the last day, and I'm really happy to meet Miss Nadia. She will tell us more about today. It's different than before. Before we meet some entrepreneurs, but now Miss Nadia, it's special and different. So we will learn more about the ISSB and how it will help the SMEs is to know about the framework of ISSB.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. No, happily. So my name's Nadia Humphreys. Thank you so much for inviting me. I work for Bloomberg as something called the Head of Sustainable Finance Data Solutions. And ultimately what we do is we work with companies and we work with investors who are really looking at both climate-related financial risk and opportunity. And as you rightly point out, I think internationally there is an adoption of this standard, this reporting standard called ISSB. And one thing, and I think you've asked me how it relates to SMEs, quite often it doesn't. There's no obligation on SMEs to do anything. But the question could be, but is it a useful exercise for SMEs to conduct? And my answer there would be yes. From an SME perspective, you have to think about the future of solutions. If you want to penetrate a market and you are innovating, then telling your story in terms of a climate narrative is really important. Now, if your business is nothing to do with climate-related solutions, that is not where you're entering the market, you still need to be really conscious of cost. You want to operate in the most energy-efficient way. You want to use water in the most resourceful way. So understanding some of the key metrics that you're asked to consider and or report on those and to appropriately manage them is important. Now from ISSB, there's really two parts of it. So there's one part that says environmental, social or governance related risks, and it talks about those as being financially material. It doesn't ask you to do good in the world, it's just asking you to consider what is financially material to your business. Now there's another part of ISSB that is climate specific. And the narrative that it uses there is climate-related risks on your business or climate-related opportunities that you can capitalize on. And I think for SMEs, there is absolutely a consideration of risks and risks from a business perspective. Are there competitors in my field that are doing things differently, more efficiently, more effectively than I am? And I should be aware of those. So certain things like the evolution of new technologies that maybe I can embrace that helps me be more efficient. And I should be thinking about that as my strategy. In terms of what to disclose, from an SME's perspective, number one is an acknowledgement that you are considering climate-related risks and opportunities. The second is thinking about how it informs your strategy. And that can be a surface level narrative of how it informs your strategy. Now, if you have particular outcomes that are climate related that you want, then it's always a good idea to have some concept of metric and target. Where do I want to be and how am I measuring progress against those? There was a really great example of a carpet manufacturer, and one of the CEOs, probably in the late 90s, before this was a real trend, he was looking at his business and said, I'm really energy intensive in my operations. Can I come back to my organization and encourage them at a senior level to really think about being resource effective? So how can I use recycled materials in the manufacture of my carpets? How can I be more water efficient, energy efficient in the way I do it? And it was really interesting in the narrative he told, he came back to his company and said, let's think about this. And actually his sales grew exponentially since they adopted that. They're now a fully circular economy, private floor carpet company. And so there are real opportunities there to transform your business if you start to embrace this way of thinking.
Okay, great. But I come up with one question that what is the relation between IFRS and ISSB?
Yeah, so IFRS is an accounting standard that is applied financially. And so what they've done, so previously ESG disclosures were either voluntary, so you decided to kind of paint a narrative of your organization about the good things you did. So large listed companies might talk originally about, community giving, projects in the local area, maybe had a couple of metrics. One of the problems we in Bloomberg faced was that data set becomes really incomparable. If someone's just narrating good things they're doing, you can't compare company A to company B. And so there was an an evolution of standards, things like GRI that have been adopted in this region that say, look, here's certain metrics we want you to report. We would like you to report carbon emissions, and we'll explain to you how to do that. So we'll direct emissions or emissions you purchase through buying energy, for example. Now, the next evolution of that is saying, okay, well, different countries globally have adopted different standards and still reporting differently.
Right.
And so what IFRS did was they said, actually, a common accounting standard is needed. We need an accounting discipline in how we report so that international investors can compare, a Vietnamese dairy to Google or Apple in the US and understand from an environmental, social or governance perspective information as it relates to where there's opportunities, where people would like to invest. So the accounting standards, IFRS, have produced ISSB. Now, one of the complexities is ISSB is a recommendation. So each local jurisdiction will adopt ISSB and transform it into a regulation or some requirements within an area. So some states are choosing slightly different ways of adopting it, but ISSB talks more generally to the accounting standards required.
Okay, great. Actually, usually I ask my last question about how the accounting service with the entrepreneurs as I am doing the entrepreneur. Now the question is for me, how I need just your advice or recommendation to how we can apply this and what step we can do it to apply to our firm as accounting service for the SMEs.
So yeah, it's really interesting actually. If we look at sort of markets that have adopted this a little earlier, let's look at Europe, for example. One of the requirements there is limited assurance provisions. So accounting is needed, audit is needed. And actually, some of the original proposals said that they needed board level sign off on the data. So the non-financial disclosure, which is where your ISSB would sit in, would be subject to the same level of scrutiny as your financial disclosure. You need to understand the data you're using, you need to be accountable for the accuracy and quality of the data that you're using, and you need senior accountability to these metrics or targets you're trying to achieve over time. Now, if you're going to start to build that discipline early, and I would recommend you do, having an accountancy organisation support you in the early days of what it is you should be measuring, how you should be measuring, so what are the standards to apply, I think is really important to adopt early on in the process. What you don't want is to have your own organic process of measuring things and then suddenly you have a standard imposed on you and you need to kind of change the way you're doing things. That's going to be really, really challenging. So starting early with good accountancy advice I think is important here.
Okay, great. Actually, I'm really glad to meet you and to take this advice because we are already starting, we are following the IFRS, so we are doing it in our firm, but this it will be add a lot of things, especially if we want to go further another step with working with the government or big also companies. So I'm really thank you, and you give us your time to give me especially this advice, and to give also it will be help my audience and entrepreneurs to hear from the who's specialist and professional in the same field.
Oh, well, happy to help. No worries. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.